Welcome to Promethean Action Saturday Night Class Series for October 26th. Tonight's class with Barbara Boyd will lead from the revelations just this week of top-level British interference in the U.S. presidential election. It's the first of a three-part series on our fight with the British Empire today, which will take place tonight, a week from tonight, 2 weeks from tonight. And I'm your host, Tony Pappert, and let me hand it over to Barbara Boyd. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Look, it's probably much less difficult today to speak about the British getting caught yet again trying to rig an American election than it was when Lyndon LaRouche first made the claim that the primary enemy of the United States, our true enemy within, was the British Empire in its modern form of foundations, central banks, and globalist consensus-creating institutions like the World Economic Forum. LaRouche was attacked, and I would argue prosecuted, for attacking the empire itself, for saying repeatedly that the Queen of England pushed dope and documenting the basis for saying that. No, he wasn't saying, as the media tried endlessly to portray it, that Queen Elizabeth was standing on a street corner somewhere selling dime bags of heroin, as he put it. But it was very clear and is clear that the British imperial financial empire depends on a black economy, a hidden economy of dope, weapons, terrorism, and war, and offshore dirty money laundering. But now the British have been outed for the second time in the last 10 years, trying to rig the American election in their favor against their number one nemesis at this point, Donald Trump. Although this week, Der Spiegel, which is a British concocted press operation out of Germany, named Elon Musk now public enemy number 2. In 2016-2020, many of us tracing the operations against Trump came back to the British hand in them again and again. The LaRouche experience, for my part, told me to always watch out for this. In fact, the entire LaRouche prosecution and our investigation of it proceeded for a long time, thinking that this was really all an American-centered operation in the prosecution of LaRouche. It turned out, after a huge amount of Freedom of Information Act requests and subsequent declassification after enormous litigation, that all of it was caused based on a specific demand that LaRouche be gone after by the British. So it wasn't just the fact in 2015 and 2016 and 2017 that the entire Russiagate narrative against Trump was originally concocted by the British as part of an overall effort by they and NATO to stem the rise of populist movements, both here in the United States and also in Britain itself through Brexit, and in the Western world more generally. Whole populations were rising up against this so-called post-World War II rules-based order, which had suppressed and completely robbed those populations of their livelihoods and indeed much of their honor. The British instigated Crossfire Hurricane, the Russiagate investigation of Trump, and fabricated all of the evidence for it, from Christopher Steele's dirty dossier on down, using British operatives and conducting operations on British soil. The Brits were simultaneously caught building a worldwide propaganda and censorship apparatus with their military funding it, called the Integrity Initiative. That got outed only because of a hack by a group called Anonymous, getting into their files and releasing that information back in 2018. That hack documented that clusters of journalists, led by many of the yellow dog journalists and reporters who are going after Trump and have been going after Trump, were being deployed in the United States and Europe generally to run defamation, smear, and cancel campaigns against any rising potential leader that resisted the empire's control. All of the elements recently discovered in the Twitter files disclosures and by Mike Bentz and his ongoing expose of everything that's happened here concerning this. For example, the State Department Central Global Engagement Center and the various NGOs associated with bringing censorship to social media platforms were founded way, way, way back then. A lot of the experimentation on and social control studies around this took place in Ukraine in the wake of the 2014 coup, with State and Defense Department and British government programs aimed at creating a new zone of warfare, not so new really, what NATO calls cognitive war, and creating propaganda and media scenarios which cause individuals to take actions in certain directions, not just to absorb discordant propaganda lines as previously practiced, for purposes of confusion and immobilization or mobilization, but really to try to figure out how do we set someone up, profile them so sufficiently that we can make them, in effect, Manchurian candidates against their own interests. But in most respects, the British role in all of this has or until this week, been airbrushed away, not focused on, when there are so many aspects of the coup against Trump out in the open, which appeared to be occurring here and through our national intelligence services. But last week on Tuesday, Matt Taibbi and Paul Thacker published a piece showing that a British NGO, the Center for Countering Digital Hate, it's called, has been conducting a year-long campaign with and in unity with Democratic members of Congress to, quote, kill Musk's Twitter. Elon Musk buying and, excuse me, can you, sorry, folks, I have an interruption here. Elon Musk buying and opening Twitter will go down as the most important save of actual democracy in this republic when history is finally written about this year. It has allowed the population to readily identify and act against various regime propaganda operations, fake stories, and other crimes, so that the weaponized narratives by which the security state usually mobilizes public opinion to conduct operations are falling like duds, and the operations themselves have backfired. Just ask yourself, if you think about it, what would the impact of the lawfare against Donald Trump have been if what you knew about it was confined to what the corporate media told you? Think about that. It doesn't end there. This CCDH operation was founded by Morgan McSweeney, who is now the Chief of Staff to the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. McSweeney also founded a Labour Party group called Labour Together, a Tony Blair-type centrist liberal organization, which is now trying to right Kamala Harris's floundering campaign by providing her with British strategic advice directly, while sending its members to the United States to campaign for Harris. As a result of these and other activities, Musk is under investigation by just about every federal agency for one reason or another, something the New York Times gloated about last week. But as significant, these operations are being almost instantaneously exposed now and robbed of their force by a population which is in revolt against their would-be masters and communicating with each other as social media was intended to do. As Joe Rogan put it in his 3-hour discussion with Trump, if you want to be a rebel, which most people do in one form or another right now, a proposition which is particularly attractive to youth and the oppressed, you're siding this year with Donald Trump. Now, understanding what will come in the next 2 weeks and afterwards really does require understanding the difference between the American and British systems, which we here at Promethean Action have been harping on, excuse me, and really shining a light on the British role. As our pamphlet documents, it has been the British who have basically assassinated every American president since Washington who has attempted to resurrect the American system of political economy invented by Alexander Hamilton. That is a system which directly, as Henry Carey, Lincoln's economist, says, opposes the British system of outright oppression of human beings and instead seeks to foster their creative power as given to them by God himself. This movement, MAGA, has the potential to restore the United States to its rightful role in the world by ending the British imperial alliance, which has existed since Franklin Roosevelt's death shortly before the end of World War II. Roosevelt, as documented by his son Elliot, wanted to use American methods, the manufacturing, infrastructure, and scientific developments which he created from the Great Depression forward through the Second World War, to end British colonialism and to end the British Empire once and for all. The British, of course, had other ideas. They wanted to execute that clause in Cecil Rhodes' will, which calls for the recolonization of the United States as a primary goal of British imperial policy. As we put it on a piece on the website this week, once Churchill concluded that he could not seduce Stalin to cede Russia to imperial rule, Russia being the doorway to the riches of Eurasia, he drew up plans for preemptive war against Russia, while Russia was still nominally an ally of the West fighting Hitler. He wanted the United States to actually become a part of that war. This is in 1945, before the war was even over with. But the United States at that point was hardly ready to join him in this insane plan. Although that plan was not implemented because it was clear the United States was nowhere near being absorbed into the empire, Lord Bertrand Russell had a successor plan for deploying the hydrogen bomb in order to capture Russia and form the basis through nuclear terror for a post-war world government centered in the British Empire. England got the bomb and basically had decided to go forward with this plan, but then the Soviet Union also got the bomb, and that plan also was canned. Now, as Randolph Churchill drunkenly told Walter Lippmann during this time, you Americans don't understand the British Empire. We have dragged you into 2 wars, and we will get you into a 3rd. As one of the honest patriots in the OSS, who we came to know as a result of our association with LaRouche, Max Corvo, he reported to LaRouche that when Roosevelt died, those patriots in the OSS knew that the prospects for a good and decent American century were over with, that something truly evil was about to take its place. Once you understand this backdrop, you will get a fuller understanding of Churchill's Iron Curtain speech. That term itself, Iron Curtain, was a Nazi propaganda term actually invented by Joseph Goebbels. And basically, Churchill, in that speech, deliberately introduced Americans to the idea of the special relationship, a post-war fraternal order of the English-speaking peoples, is how he put it, once again incorporating the formerly independent United States and functioning in unity in all world affairs. The idea there was that the British would provide the statecraft and the intellectual heft to a new form of empire, while Americans would provide the brawn, the military and economic strength. This was a kind of unparalleled hubris drawn from the belief that the British truly succeeded in founding an enduring successor to the Roman Empire, and that the human race itself depended upon its continuance. At the end of the Second World War, as opposed to this hubris, the British were largely bankrupt, although they still had a strong and developing scientific and engineering potential. As compared to the United States, however, the backwardness in which the general population was kept by the empire inhibited the ability to grow the economy, unlike the developed labor power of United States workers who were able to convert scientific discoveries into technology and engineering marvels. So the empire was literally incapable of doing anything in the world without seducing the United States into this insane relationship, which has existed ever since. Now, similar to the relationship of the modern British Labour Party to Joe Biden or Tony Blair's relationship to Bill Clinton, British operations to implement this plan were led here by one Ernest Bevin, someone you probably have never heard of, a brawling trade unionist who Churchill appointed during the war to run all labor organizations in Britain, and becoming the foreign minister, outsmarted Harry Truman by orders of magnitude. He hated the United States. He kept a sculpture of George III on his desk, and he called him my hero. The Brits, of course, also had major assets here, and they'd had them for a very long time, such as the Dulles brothers, the Morgans and Harriman banking interests, the Rockefellers, and the powerful New York law firms and foundations who served them, along with major media, such as the Hearst and Luce publications and the New York Times. These enemies within were absolutely critical to their plans. Especially important with respect to Truman personally was John Wesley Snyder, Harry Truman's alter ego and a key advisor, and someone who was totally manipulated by Bevin on behalf of British interests. Bevin secured loans from the United States to keep the empire up and running, invented NATO, set up the intelligence and military alliances which still function to this day, while proposing that the colonial powers of Britain, France, and the Netherlands should form a third bloc of world power to offset the United States and the Soviet Union. There are lots of people today who claim that the American empire is the font of the satanic imperialism in this world, and actually believe the myth that the British Empire ended at the end of World War II, and America stepped forward, grabbed the flag of imperial empire, and took over. In fact, that's the dominant view. Yet nothing is further from the truth. The British bluffed the United States by hysterically claiming that they were bankrupt and that their empire, seen uniformly in Washington as a bulwark against Stalin and communist expansion in the world, was vastly overextended and was no longer able to exert any power. They used their media assets to create virtual hysteria in Washington in the wake of this theme, that the British Empire was about to collapse. In fact, John J. McCloy said that the imminent collapse of the British Empire was a worse crisis than any possible communist or Soviet expansion in the world. Now, until Trump, and despite massive resistance at times within the American population, particularly right after World War II, through the Eisenhower administration, and to a certain extent beginning with the Kennedy administration, had Kennedy not been assassinated, the British plot, articulated by Winston Churchill, to suck the United States into imperial adventure and globalist economic policies, had largely succeeded. Until Trump, American history had been rewritten to erase the true story of our founding and its intellectual predecessors in the Augustinian and Platonic traditions of Europe, projecting instead British motives and British imperial policies as those of our founders, when the opposite was almost in every case not the case. Bob Ingram has written books on this. Heck, we even honor Churchill as a hero, the man who started us down this evil and satanic path. Trump's return to the American system policies and his proposal to end the U.S. role as a satrap of British imperial aims basically to end the forever wars which we became involved in, is at the heart of the British drive to subvert his efforts and to kill him. Now, people like to look at this in terms of structures, in terms of institutions and nouns and lattice tree Venn diagrams and such. They forget that NATO, in most respects, is right, that the primary arena of warfare is the human mind. The British like to say that their primary exercise of power is what they call soft power, i.e., totally controlling, being hegemonic in the realm of ideas, theories, how we know what we know. And that is true. Americans flock to British universities to be trained in liberal arts and critical thinking. British methods of analysis are dominant in major scientific fields, and particularly in history. The FBI and CIA were both indoctrinated with British methods of investigation, analysis, and psychological warfare and political subversion, and the continuing relationship reinforces that training, so it's difficult to identify any truly independent American intelligence current after World War II. It used to exist at West Point. It used to exist in the State Department. It used to exist in the military's training. This melding and recolonization has perhaps reached its apogee under Biden, although the result would undoubtedly have been the same under Hillary Clinton. On September 6th, the head of MI6, Richard Spencer, and the head of the CIA, Bill Burns, announced at a forum given by the Financial Times, the City of London's mouthpiece, that the two agencies, the CIA and MI6, are really one. Sit up, everyone, blaming the CIA alone for everything, and take note of that. That has been the case in most instances of Anglo-American crimes since 1946. Joe Biden's entire foreign and domestic policy, the Green New Deal, the Great Reset, the war with Ukraine involving all of NATO, all of it has been dictated by the British, and the American presidency, as dictated by our Constitution, has been, over the period of the Biden-Harris regime, largely vacant, with collective experts taking the place of the president, like the British Privy Council or British Cabinet. George Soros is a longtime British agent, if you actually look it up. Joe Biden's fascination with democracy and the intelligence community's use of protecting democracy as a war cry was created by George Soros's mentor, Sir Karl Popper, and his notions of world government and open societies without borders of any type. The Heritage Foundation, now so big in the news, was founded as a font of British neoliberal economics and free trade here in the United States. Stuart Butler, one of its original policy wonks, said that its mission was to fully educate Americans in British ideology, and its early staff consisted solely of members of the Fabian Society, the International Institute for Strategic Studies, the vaunted IIIS, which actually controls all British foreign and intelligence policy, and the Mount Pelerin Society of Libertarian so-called Austrian school economists. So Henry Carey, Lincoln's economist, said, what's at stake? There are two contrary systems at work in the world. That still is the case. We have the American system, which Donald Trump has embraced and which we keep harping on here at Promethean Action, and which holds the keys to a most profound future for this country. Then there is the British system, the imperial system, the empire, that which has raped and robbed the world ever since the end of World War II, and would very much like to continue to do so. That's the reason why they're out to get and kill Trump no matter what. It's also the reason why they will fail ultimately, because the American population, because of Donald Trump, has risen up now and basically is learning about its actual history, is learning about what it means to fight, is learning why, as a first priority in defending Donald Trump, we have to put a spotlight on the British Empire, hold them accountable. You shoot for the head, and other things follow. And they are definitely the head. So that's what I got to say for tonight. And hopefully I've provoked a lot of questions.
Right.